A small-town woman walks into court to clear her name, but what she uncovers will bring down a corrupt judge, destroy a powerful career, and flip the legal system upside down. It's a scandal no one saw coming. And the truth? It's shocking. You won't believe the bombshells that drop along the way. Stick around till the end. You won't want to miss how it all unfolds. Chapter 1. The judge who didn't see it coming. Caroline Leavitt wasn't here to just clear her name. She was here to bury a lie, and the man responsible for it. As she stepped into the courtroom, her nerves kicked in, but she shoved them down. She had bigger things to worry about. She could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on her. But it was the judge that caught her attention. Judge Ronald Pierce, sitting up there all smug, with his polished shoes and oversized ego, didn't know what was about to hit him. "You really think you can just walk in here and beat me, sweetheart?" Pierce sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. Caroline held her ground. She was done being the victim. This wasn't just some courtroom drama. This was her life. Her reputation had been torn apart by a lie, and Pierce was standing right in front of her. An unshakable pillar of the system she'd been taught to trust. But he was the one who had to fall. Her lawyer, James, stood beside her, calm and collected. "Your Honor, we're not here to argue," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "We're here to expose the truth." The judge's eyebrows shot up. "The truth," he mocked. "What truth? That a woman can't handle the heat when things get a little spicy?" Caroline didn't flinch. She was used to being dismissed. But this time the gloves were off. She looked right at him. "You think I'm here for some pity party? Nah, Judge. I'm here because your game is up." A hush fell over the room as Caroline turned to the gallery, her voice steady but fierce. "I'm not the one who started the fire, but I sure as hell know how to finish it." Pierce's smirk faltered, but just for a second. He was quick to recover. "You don't scare me. This case is already over before it even starts." Caroline's hands tightened into fists. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about every single person who had ever been crushed under the weight of the system. It was about proving that even the most untouchable could be brought down. The tension in the air was palpable. It wasn't just Caroline who could feel it. Everyone in that room could tell that something was about to snap. And Pierce, he had no idea just how much trouble he was really in. But she wasn't done. Caroline knew one thing for sure. The judge was about to regret every arrogant word he'd just said. And she was the one who would make him pay. As the gavel came down, Caroline's heart raced. This was only the beginning, but the walls were starting to crumble. Pierce thought he had control. He was wrong. Caroline was in the driver's seat now. And she wasn't about to let him take the wheel again. The crowd shifted nervously as the next phase of the battle was set in motion. Caroline's words weren't just a warning. They were a promise. Stay tuned. The truth was about to hit like a wrecking ball. Chapter 2. The lie that ruined everything. Caroline's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade, steady but laced with raw emotion. "I didn't just lose a job. I lost my name, my reputation, my dignity." She paused, her eyes narrowing as she locked onto the judge, who was still leaning back in his chair like he hadn't a care in the world. The nerve. And all of it was destroyed because of a lie you were too lazy to even question. The room went dead silent. Pierce didn't flinch. He simply raised an eyebrow and looked down at his papers, acting like Caroline's words didn't even matter. But Caroline wasn't done. Oh no. She was just getting started. "It was no mistake," she continued, her voice growing stronger with every word. "This wasn't some misunderstanding. This was orchestrated. A well-crafted plot designed to ruin me. By who? By the defendant and their shady business partner. And you know what?" She let the words hang in the air. "You played right into it, didn't you, Your Honor?" Pierce shifted in his seat, his face momentarily tightening. The facade was cracking, and Caroline could see it. He knew she was telling the truth. He just didn't want to admit it. "Defamation is no small thing, Judge," Caroline said, her eyes never leaving his. "One word, one false sentence, and boom, your life is over. It's a damn shame no one seemed to care about that when they slandered me." She glanced around the room, her gaze sweeping over the jury. "But you thought you were above it all, didn't you?" The words hung in the air like smoke, thick with the kind of tension that could snap at any moment. Caroline wasn't just telling a story. She was calling out the entire system. And it wasn't just the judge she was after. She was going for the heart of the corruption that had been allowed to fester unchecked. The defendant, sitting across the room with his smug grin, shifted uncomfortably. Caroline could see the sweat forming on his brow. Good. He should be nervous. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. And it wasn't looking good for him. But the real bombshell was still to come. Caroline's lawyer stood up, holding a sealed folder in his hands. He moved toward the table slowly, deliberately, like he knew he was holding the one thing that could change everything. All eyes turned to him, and Caroline could feel the anticipation building in the air. The tension was suffocating. He opened the folder with a snap. Caroline watched the judge's face change. She'd never seen someone go from cocky to downright pale so fast. This, James said, pointing to the evidence, is the key to everything. Judge Pierce's eyes darted to the documents. The blood drained from his face. He couldn't even disguise it anymore. The courtroom was on the edge of its seat, waiting for the truth to drop. Caroline leaned forward, her voice low and deadly serious. You thought you could get away with it, didn't you? You thought your secrets were safe. She let out a breath, then smirked. Not anymore. The gavel came down. Everyone knew. This was just the beginning. The truth was out, and nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 3. The bombshell that changed everything. The courtroom was dead silent. Every single person on the edge of their seat. Caroline's lawyer, James, had just laid the bombshell on the table, and all eyes were now fixed on the sealed folder in his hands. The judge's face had gone from cocky confidence to pale disbelief in the blink of an eye. He was trying to hide it, but the evidence was clear, and it was about to blow up his entire world. James took a slow breath, the room hanging in suspense. Your Honor, I think it's time we talked about a little conflict of interest. You see this? He motioned to the folder. This changes everything. Caroline couldn't take her eyes off the judge. His hands were shaking, just a little, but enough for her to notice. Pierce cleared his throat, trying to regain control. What is this nonsense? He demanded, voice gruff but clearly rattled. You're wasting my time. But James wasn't backing down. He held up the documents. This isn't nonsense. It's the hard truth. He threw a glance at Caroline before turning his attention back to the judge. You've been pocketing money from the defendant's firm, haven't you? The judge's expression flickered for just a second. A blink, barely noticeable, but it was enough. Caroline's gut twisted. She could feel the rush of adrenaline coursing through her. This was it. This was the moment that everything had been leading to. Judge Pierce looked around, his face reddening. This is absurd, he spat, his voice rising. But Caroline could see the cracks in his armor. The smirk was gone. Now there was only panic. James flipped through the pages and pointed to a line of text. This is where it all started. You've been involved with their financials for years, and now we have the proof. His voice was calm, like he was laying out the facts. But the words hit like a freight train. The judge swallowed hard. I don't know what you think you're looking at, but you're mistaken, he stammered. Caroline couldn't take it anymore. She stood, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Don't even try it, Pierce, she said, her tone deadly serious. We know you've been playing both sides, sitting in that chair, pretending to be some kind of saint while lining your pockets with dirty money. The judge opened his mouth to retort, but nothing came out. He was done. The walls were closing in. James slammed the folder on the desk, not even looking at the judge anymore. The only thing that's mistaken here is you thinking you could get away with it. He shot a look to the gallery, making sure the gravity of the situation hit everyone. And now it's time for you to pay the price. The room seemed to hold its breath. Everyone knew the judge was about to be exposed, and the scandal was about to hit the headlines. But there was no turning back now. The evidence was in front of everyone, and it couldn't be ignored. Caroline leaned forward, locking eyes with the judge. Your days of sitting in that chair and pretending to be above the law are over. Her words were low like a warning shot. You're done. As the judge glanced around, realizing there was no way out, the gavel came down hard. This case had just gone from bad to worse for him. And Caroline? She had just taken the first step in turning the tables on a man who thought he was untouchable. It wasn't over yet, But one thing was for sure. Things were never going to be the same. The game had changed, and Caroline was winning. Chapter 4. The request that shook the court. The courtroom was buzzing with tension. Caroline could practically feel the air crackling as James slid the folder back across the table, his eyes locked on Judge Pierce. The judge had tried to play it cool, but everyone could see the sweat on his brow. He was rattled. The evidence was damning, and now, it was only a matter of time before his career crumbled. Caroline's heart pounded in her chest. This was the moment. Her lawyer had just exposed the judge's dirty secret, and there was no turning back. But James wasn't done. He leaned forward, his voice steady but sharp as he turned to the judge. "We request your immediate recusal, Your Honor," James said, his words cutting through the thick silence like a knife. Pierce froze. His face tightened, and for a second, he looked like he might explode. "What did you just say?" The question came out low, full of venom, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You heard me," James replied, his voice cold and unflinching. "You're compromised, and we can't trust you to handle this case. Not anymore." The courtroom went dead silent, as if everyone was holding their breath. Caroline could see the wheels turning in Pierce's head. His hands, which had been clenched into fists on the desk, now trembled slightly. He was losing control. "How dare you?" Pierce snapped, standing up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I'm the one in charge here. You don't get to make demands." "Oh, we're well aware you're in charge," James said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But your position isn't a free pass to break the law." The judge's face turned an ugly shade of red, his breathing shallow as his temper flared. "You're asking me to step down? Do you have any idea who I am?" he roared. "I know exactly who you are," Caroline said, standing up and cutting through his rage. Her voice was calm, but there was a fire in her eyes. "A man who's too arrogant to see that the truth always comes to light." Pierce's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing into cold slits. "You think you've won? You think I'll just walk out of here?" he growled. Caroline didn't flinch. "You're done, Pierce. Your actions have consequences. You can either leave now, or we can make you leave. It's up to you." The room was heavy with tension. The crowd could feel it. Caroline could feel it too. The moment when the scales of justice finally tipped in her favor. James stood firm beside her, unwavering. "We're asking for your resignation, Judge Pierce," he repeated, each word like a hammer driving the final nail into the coffin of Pierce's career. "It's over." The judge's face twisted in a mixture of disbelief and fury. But deep down, Caroline knew it was happening. The walls around him were closing in, and no matter how hard he fought, he couldn't escape the truth. For a moment, the judge just stood there frozen, staring at them with wild eyes. Then, with a growl of frustration, he grabbed the gavel and slammed it down with a force that echoed through the room. "I'm not going anywhere," he barked, his voice strained, desperate. But the damage was done. Caroline knew it. James knew it. And Pierce? He knew it too. The battle was far from over. But Caroline could taste the victory in the air. The first real blow had been struck, and there was no coming back from it. The game had just changed. Chapter 5. The judge makes a run for it. The courtroom doors slammed shut with a force that sent a shockwave through the room. Everyone froze. Judge Pierce had just stormed out of the courtroom, his face twisted in anger and humiliation. He didn't even bother to glance back. It was clear, he was done. Caroline couldn't help but feel a flicker of satisfaction. He thought he could get away with it, but now he was running scared. James looked over at Caroline with a smirk. "Guess we know who's in charge now." Caroline didn't respond immediately. She was too busy watching the empty space where Pierce had just been. Her mind was racing, processing everything that had just happened. The man who had been so sure of himself, so confident in his power, had just walked out with his tail between his legs. It was surreal. "Can you believe that?" she muttered, more to herself than to James. He actually thought he could pull that off. James shook his head, clearly amused. "It was a pretty bold move, but it's over now. He knows he's done. The question is, who's next?" Just then, the courtroom door creaked open again, and a new figure stepped in. The room went silent as everyone turned to look at the newcomer. It was Judge Andrea Teller, calm, composed, and ready to take control. "Sorry about the delay," Judge Teller said as she made her way to the bench. "Let's get this show on the road, shall we?" Caroline wasn't sure if it was a relief or a new kind of tension in the air. The judge had changed, but the stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was personal. Teller took her seat and scanned the room. "I've reviewed the materials, and it looks like we have a lot to unpack. But let's be clear. I will not tolerate any more games being played in this courtroom." Caroline nodded, finally allowing herself to breathe a little easier. Teller seemed like a no-nonsense kind of person. Someone who wouldn't put up with the kind of corruption that had been running rampant before. "I want this to move fast," Teller continued, her voice firm. "I'm not here to waste anyone's time. Let's get down to business." Caroline's lawyer, James, stood up. "Your Honor, we're here because of a serious conflict of interest. We've presented the evidence against Judge Pierce, and now we need to continue this case without further delay." The judge looked up at him, her eyes narrowing. "I understand. And let's be clear, I'll make sure the proper steps are taken. No one gets to hide behind a badge in my courtroom." Caroline could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The fight wasn't over yet, but the tone had changed. The old guard was gone. And maybe, just maybe, there was hope for real justice. "I don't want any more delays," Teller said, her voice cold and authoritative. "We're not here for drama. We're here to get answers." The tension in the room was palpable, but it was different now. It wasn't the fear of being crushed by a corrupt system. It was the excitement of a fight that was finally on equal ground. "Let's get to it," Caroline whispered under her breath. "This ends now." And just like that, the game had shifted. Judge Pierce was out. And if this new judge was anything like the look in her eyes, this was going to be a whole new ballgame. Chapter 6. The scandal breaks wide open. Caroline couldn't believe what was happening. The scandal she had fought so hard to expose was now a full-blown wildfire. The story of Judge Pierce's corruption was everywhere. On the news, on social media, in every corner of the city. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. Every headline screamed his name. But now, it wasn't just about him. It was about the system that had failed for so long. In the space of a few hours, Pierce had gone from untouchable to a pariah. Caroline had no idea how quickly the story would spread, but she was starting to see just how big this was going to get. The moment the leak hit the media, it was like someone had opened a floodgate. Everyone had questions. The press wanted answers. People were furious, demanding justice. And in the middle of all of it, Caroline had become the face of the fight for truth. James was on the phone with the media, trying to handle the chaos. Caroline sat across from him, her hands gripping the edge of the table. It was surreal. She had never been in the spotlight like this, but somehow, it didn't feel as bad as she thought it would. In fact, it felt good, empowering. She looked up at James. "This is huge. Is it really going to make that much of a difference?" James finished his call and gave her a look. "Caroline, you have no idea. This isn't just about you anymore. This is about every single person who's ever been let down by a corrupt system. You've just sparked something that can't be stopped." Caroline felt a strange mix of pride and fear. She hadn't set out to start a revolution. She just wanted to clear her name. But now everything had changed. As the press conferences and interviews piled up, Caroline started to see just how deep the rabbit hole went. It wasn't just Pierce. The more people dug, the more skeletons started to fall out of the closet. Judge Pierce wasn't the only one with ties to shady business deals. Others were implicated, their names suddenly popping up in connection to the same firms Caroline had exposed. "Man, this is bigger than I thought," James said, shaking his head as he read through the latest batch of articles. "They're calling it the scandal of the decade. People are losing their minds over this." Caroline could hardly keep up with the news. Every new development felt like a gut punch. But through it all, she felt a growing sense of satisfaction. Pierce might be running, but the truth was coming out, and the world wasn't going to let him get away with it. That night, the buzz was everywhere. People were talking, tweeting, posting about the judge's downfall. The public outrage was deafening. People were furious, demanding that the judicial system be held accountable. Caroline didn't care if she was the face of it all. She knew this was bigger than her. This was about cleaning up a system that had been broken for too long. The news anchor on TV came on, reading the latest update. A full investigation is now underway, and the Judicial Conduct Commission has promised a thorough review of Judge Pierce's actions. This may be just the tip of the iceberg. Stay tuned for more on this unfolding scandal. Caroline leaned back, letting the weight of it sink in. This wasn't over yet. The fight had only just begun. And for the first time, Caroline wasn't afraid. She wasn't backing down. The truth was out there now, and nothing was going to stop it from coming to light. Pierce may have thought he was untouchable, but the world had just proven him wrong. The wheels of justice were in motion, and Caroline was the one who had set them in motion. Chapter 7. The system cracks and the judge's world shatters. The chaos was everywhere. News stations were running full coverage. Online platforms were buzzing with accusations, speculations, and outrage. Caroline couldn't escape it. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Her inbox was flooded with messages from reporters and people she didn't even know. It felt like the entire world was watching, and they all wanted answers. "Look at this," James said, tossing his phone on the table in front of her. The Judicial Conduct Commission is launching a full investigation into Pierce. People are losing their minds over this. It's trending everywhere. Caroline barely glanced at the screen. She'd seen enough headlines to last a lifetime. It was all the same. Judge Pierce exposed for corruption. The scandal that rocked the courtroom. And of course, is this the end for Judge Pierce? Everyone had an opinion, and the public was demanding justice. Caroline leaned back in her chair, trying to process it all. "I never thought it would get this big," she muttered, her fingers nervously tapping on the table. "I just wanted the truth to come out, but this is unstoppable." James finished for her. He leaned in, his eyes gleaming. "This is more than just you now, Caroline. It's a movement. People want to see real change. They want to see the system brought down." The weight of his words hit her harder than she expected. She'd known the stakes were high, but now it felt like everything was shifting. The corruption she'd exposed wasn't just about Pierce anymore. It was about a system that had been broken for far too long. People were demanding accountability, and they weren't backing down. "Do you think it'll actually happen?" Caroline asked, her voice quiet but urgent. "Do you think they'll really go after him?" James didn't hesitate. They have no choice now. Once the commission starts looking into it, it's over for Pierce. And trust me, they're going to dig deep. This whole thing's bigger than just a bad judge. There's a reason why people are so pissed off. This goes all the way to the top. Caroline nodded slowly. She had always known that the system had cracks, but she hadn't expected to be the one to make it break open. The thought of Pierce being brought down, along with everything he stood for, was almost surreal. "I didn't want to ruin anyone's life," Caroline said softly, her gaze distant. "But I couldn't let him get away with it. Not when so many people were hurt." James looked at her, his expression softening. "You didn't ruin his life, Caroline. He did that all on his own. All you did was expose the truth. You're not the villain here." But Caroline wasn't so sure. She had started this journey to clear her name, but somewhere along the way, it became about more than just her. She was fighting for something bigger now, something that could change everything. As the days passed, the pressure kept mounting. The stories kept coming, and the calls for Pierce's removal only grew louder. Caroline could hear it in the voices of the people on TV, in the tweets, in the chants of the protesters who'd gathered outside the courthouse. They were demanding justice, and they were making sure their voices were heard. Caroline sat in silence for a moment, processing everything. "It's like we've kicked over a hornet's nest," she said finally. "Everything's changing." James gave a small smile. "And you're the one who made it happen. Don't forget that. You've got a lot more power than you realize." Caroline stared out the window, her thoughts racing. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. But now, for the first time, she felt like she was on the winning side. And that felt damn good. The truth had finally broken through the surface, and it wasn't going back into the shadows. Chapter 8. The moment that changed everything. The days after the scandal broke felt like they stretched on forever. Caroline had been caught in the whirlwind of the media storm, with reporters calling nonstop, news outlets knocking down her door for interviews, and the public watching her every move. It was surreal. She had always wanted justice, but now that it was happening, she wasn't sure what to feel anymore. The truth had been exposed, but the cost was higher than she could have imagined. She sat in the quiet of her apartment one evening, staring at her reflection in the dark window. The woman looking back at her was different from the one who had walked into that courtroom all those weeks ago. Stronger, fiercer, unafraid, but also scarred. The weight of it all was starting to hit her. I didn't think it would be like this, Caroline whispered to herself, rubbing her temples. The endless media frenzy, the scrutiny from all sides, it was exhausting. She had started this journey to clear her name, but now it felt like she was carrying the weight of an entire broken system on her shoulders. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was James. She picked it up, not bothering to check the message before answering. "You all right?" he asked, his voice calm but concerned. Caroline sighed. "I don't know. It's like everything's changed. The world's watching, and I'm not sure if I'm ready for it." "You're doing just fine," James reassured her. "This isn't easy, but you're not in it alone. And look, the truth's out there now. People are hearing you, they're listening. That's powerful." Caroline felt a little bit of that pressure lift off her chest, but the weight of what had happened still lingered. The Judge Pierce had been removed from his position, and the investigation into his corruption was underway. But it wasn't over. Not yet. There were still too many questions, too many people in power, who had gotten away with things for far too long. "I didn't set out to change the world, you know," Caroline said, her voice quiet. "I just wanted to clear my name. But now it feels like I've started something bigger than me. Like there's no turning back." "And that's exactly what's happening," James replied. "You stood up for yourself, Caroline. You stood up for everyone who's been wronged, and now the whole damn system's getting an overhaul." She let his words sink in. For the first time, she realized that this fight wasn't just about her. She had become the catalyst for something bigger than herself. Something that could shake up the very foundation of how things worked. Caroline leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. The long battle to expose the truth had cost her more than she expected. But it had also given her something she hadn't even known she needed: empowerment. For the first time, she was able to look people in the eye without flinching. She didn't feel small anymore. She didn't feel powerless. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said quietly, but with conviction. "Not of him, not of anyone. I did what needed to be done, and I'm not turning back." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Good," James finally said. "Because this is just the beginning. You've got the strength to keep pushing, and people are going to follow your lead. You've already changed everything, Caroline." The words hung in the air, heavy with the realization of what had just happened. It was more than just a courtroom victory. It was the start of something that could reshape everything. Caroline smiled to herself, her reflection now looking back at her with a new kind of confidence. "Yeah," she said softly. "I think you're right." The truth had set her free, and now, nothing could stop her. Not anymore. The fall of a judge, and the rise of a hero. In a world where power hides behind closed doors, Caroline Leavitt wasn't just a woman fighting for her reputation. She was a force that tore down corruption and forced the truth into the spotlight. Judge Pierce thought he was untouchable, but his empire crumbled when Caroline exposed his dirty secrets. What started as a fight to clear her name turned into a movement that shook the system to its core. But this isn't the end, it's just the beginning. The system will never be the same, and neither will Caroline. She stood up, and the world listened. Don't miss out. Subscribe, hit like, and ring the bell to catch all the jaw-dropping stories coming your way. You won't want to miss what's next.